With a focus on independence in Trinidad and Tobago, we are putting a spotlight on individuals who have given of themselves to their country. With that in mind, we're very happy to speak with Emile Elias. Now, he's a familiar name in Trinidad and Tobago, but many times you hear construction and state boards. They may be the first things that come to mind, but there's so much more to the man. We're happy to have the opportunity to peel back some layers and discover more of what there is to the name. So we say, hello, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me, yes.
When people say the name Emile Elias, what really comes to mind? Who do people say you are?
A troublesome person. Yeah, well, mostly I was in the public eye because I spent 29 years as an active volunteer in the family planning movement. And of course in the construction industry. Not only because I made a living as a contractor, but I was one of the founders of the Contractors Association, which is flourishing today, and the JCC, which is the Joint Consultative Council for the Building Industry, which is also flourishing today. And these bodies have been in the front line of establishing, you know, integrity and transparency in the public procurement process. And for that, I'm very grateful to those who have come after me and achieved those things. But the family planning activity started in 1970 in the middle of the so-called Black Power riots. And I was listening to a radio program which I thought was trying to promote family planning, but it wasn't doing it very well. So I called the chairman, who I happened to know, and she just said, well, Emile, if you can do better, come and help us. And that was like a trigger. So I went down to the FPA, and as I said, in 1970, and then by 1973, I was the chairman. 1976, I became the president. And so I spent, until 1999, when I retired, 29 years of, I would say, intense activity in a voluntary position as one of the, I should say, standard bearers of the FPA and the family planning movement. I was elected to the regional body because IPPF is the world body, and there are regional bodies that belong to the IPPF, which is the International Planned Parenthood Federation. So I got elected to the regional body, then I became regional chairman, then I became the regional treasurer, and then I became the international treasurer, which was the first time in the history of the IPPF that a third world person was entrusted, if you like, with the money of the federation. So that was quite something. So yeah, that's been a journey of 29 years, and we achieved a lot. But you know, it's sad to say that today we still have, you know, even more rampant domestic violence and child abuse. I think these are areas that maybe the FPA might want to consider shifting a bit of focus away from, say, the family planning, contraceptive, healthcare aspects, and deal with, you know, but they already do a lot of work in AIDS prevention. I'm hoping, I'm disappointed in the fact that as a country we have not progressed a lot when it comes to, you know, child abuse. So that was one aspect of the last 30 years or so of that part of my life.
But you're talking about the last 30 years of your life?
No, of that aspect.
Of that aspect,
Yes.
sorry.
It ended in 1999, which was 17 years ago. A lot of people, even in the FPA now, don't even know what I did there, but it was a very satisfying time for me. I felt I was making a contribution to the nation, to women in need, to families in need, and I fought very hard for the cause that we stood for, you know, and I've derived a lot of satisfaction from that. And you know, we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the FPA next month, in September.
So that means that you're a little older than the FPA, yes. And your birthday is coming around, so we say happy birthday in advance.
Thank you.
But coming up and getting into this sort of activism, there would have been people who inspired you. Who are some of those people?
Well, you know, Mrs. McBride, who was one of the founders of the FPA in 1956. She was the person that, you know, drew me into. She was like a spider weaving a web. She was very clever. And I was a willing person because my heart was in doing something. So she was a real inspiration. And when I became an active volunteer in the FPA, our president was Sir Hugh Wooding. Very few people remember that Sir Hugh Wooding was our president for many years until he died. He died in office, actually. And I succeeded him. I felt inadequate at the time. I didn't think that I was worthy of stepping into his shoes. We did try to get a whole number of people to accept the position, and they all declined, saying, you know, family planning was too controversial and it's too, you know, they didn't want to be associated with something that was trying to break new ground and be an agent of change. So I eventually accepted the presidency and remained president until 1999. But back then, you know, I was described many times in editorials as a voice crying in the wilderness. I think today there has been a distinct shift. And I think the concepts I stood for, which were pioneering back then, are accepted now, you know, relatively smaller families and health care and that sort of thing. But the challenges today are different. And one of them I mentioned was child abuse and other things. So there's still a lot of issues and challenges that we should be addressing as a nation a little more vigorously.
What are some of those?
Well, I think domestic violence and child abuse are two areas. And I think some of the early childhood care, you know, the health care of kids. I remember one of the many conferences I went to abroad, there was an eminent professor who gave a lecture, and he said something that touched me. He said, between conception and the age of 3, if children are not nurtured and fed and cared for properly, there's permanent damage to their brains, permanent, as opposed to somebody who may go through a bad patch when they're 9 or 10 years old. And I think we see so many examples today of prenatal and postnatal nutrition being ignored. And I think that is an area that we could also focus on a lot more.
Now, you speak about going to different conferences and being away and being involved, because this all seems very involved. I'm wondering how you actually navigated work life, family life, and not-for-profit or organizations like that life.
It was very difficult. I hope my daughter forgives me for not spending as much time with her when she was a child. I'm making up for it now. But yes, your work suffers. Of course, my business would have flourished a lot more if I had only done that. And I was never happy only doing that. And yes, I suppose if one were to write it all down, I could be a bit richer, but so what? You know, that didn't seem to me to give me the fulfillment I wanted to feel when I was doing something that I thought was worthy, you know, giving back to the country and to the world, really, because in the international arena, I spent about 14 or 15 years working in parallel with my local FPA duties. I worked in the international arena as well. And it was all voluntary. You don't get paid. So you have to get satisfaction some other way. And looking back, I would say that it has been a wonderful experience. No regrets whatsoever that I did neglect my business. And even today I'm doing so now, because as chairman of TSTT, takes up about maybe 30% of my working day. And I'm not an executive chairman, but in order to grapple with the issues, also to learn all there is that I could possibly learn about technology and the communications industry, You know, it's and trying to transform TSTT from the legacy of being a telephone company, you know, telco, to an agile broadband communications company. And we're on that road now. So that's also very satisfying.
But there'll be some people who say, well, even if you do not say that you get total fulfillment from just your business, you need to put more into your business to be able to give back to community after the fact. What would you tell that person in terms of the importance of actually saying, while you're doing this, you're also doing that, to make sure that everyone comes up at the same time?
Well, if I focused only on my business and made more money, then I could give some more money away. But I think what I gave was more precious, which was my time, my life, my commitment, and leadership of the institutions that were trying to do good things for the country and to make the country a better place. And I think I got the mix right, but probably with a bias towards my voluntary activity and a little too much neglect of my own business and my family to a certain extent. Yes, I think that was if I had to do it again, I think I might consider spending a little more time with my family. I don't know about the business. I think I spent enough time in business. You know, it's a way to make a living, yes, and you get satisfaction, and you have to earn a living. But the sense of achievement that I got from doing things in say, the FPA, or in the Contractors Association, the JCC, you know, being part of the startup of the Cancer Society. I was one of the founders of the Cancer Society. And then in 1987, I became the chairman of the Self-Help. I founded the Self-Help Commission. I was the founding chairman for about 9 years. And we really did some incredible work there to stimulate a sense of community within the pockets of people who said they had unmet needs. And we would say, fine, you bring the community together and we will match your efforts. And we never paid money to anybody to do anything. The community did all the labor. Let's say there was a water project, we would provide the pipes. They would do all the labor, dig the trenches, and WASA would come and connect. So we had a kind of tripartite arrangement, but they got the water. And they got it through their own self-help efforts.
I wanted to ask about it. How do you think, what's the significance of actually getting it that way, as opposed to saying, we want water, please, Mr. MP, or we're not going to vote for you, or saying, okay, basically some people would actually ask for putting out a hand or asking for a handout, as opposed to saying, this is my sweat, these are my tears, and this is my blood that has gone into this effort, so I feel so much more invested in the project.
Well, you know, in 1987, we had an economic crisis. And today's economic crisis is not as bad because we do have reserves, but it's just as bad economically. So communities back in 1987, many of them came, excuse me, they came to me saying, well, look, we need this. And I said, no, if you come here because you want a handout, I will direct you to the Minister of Works, and you can go there and try. If you want to work for your community and you want to work hand in hand with us, you've come to the right place. And we literally changed the way people thought about this gimme gimme syndrome. So I think we actually brought about, I mean, we did over 2,000 projects. We brought about a national kind of energy that said to communities, take pride in what you want. Choose the project you want. If you need a road or you need water, which one do you want first? Do you know what one community told us? We prefer the road. We can always get rainwater, but we cannot stand the idea that our children going to school in the morning have muddy feet before they even get to the main road. So they chose a road over water. You would think water being the first thing you would need. And so we helped them to build a road so they could walk out from the inside of their village into the main road on a paved area, and the kids would get to school without muddy feet.
What elements from that experience can we take and apply in this situation nationally?
Well, it's difficult because, you see, the problem we have in our democracy is that good economics is bad politics, or conversely, good politics is bad economics. But we need a leader, and Dr. Rowley, I think, has that in him. We need a leader to tell people, look, we cannot keep out-promising the opposition versus the government, making so many promises just to get elected. And it destroys the fabric of the nation. It destroys the feeling of self-reliance, which is the foundation of any society, really. So I think that the Self-Help Commission, which is still there, lost its way and became another handout organization. You would even read about, somebody had a problem, so they gave them $15,000. But that is what social welfare is supposed to do. Self-help is about stimulating self-reliance. And I think we need to reinvent the Self-Help Commission and go back out there and make sure that that's what we do.
Many times people talk about having elders in the community, but someone actually raised the topic of there being many olders, but not as many elders, and people able to impart that mentorship aspect. People who come into contact with you, what is one of the things that you would really like them to leave knowing and leave better for?
You mean when they interact with me?
Definitely.
Well, but first of all, I think, I believe in truth. I believe in people being open and honest. All my life in the construction industry, I have fought for transparency and integrity in public procurement. And my colleague Winston Riley was head of the effort to bring about the public procurement reform, which was passed in Parliament. This is a construction industry-led effort. We were fighting all these years for the introduction of that kind of integrity in public life as far as public procurement goes. Because honest contractors could not compete with those who weren't unless we have the ground rules that protect us. So if people talk with me and they come to me, say, for help, what I want to know is, what are you doing about it yourself? And the very idea that we don't have elders anymore as much as we used to is because the communities are not coming together to work. Everything is being handed out. Promises are made, box drains and foolishness. You hear a lot of that. And to my mind, money could be put into self-help because you have to have a matching grant. But self-help needs to be in the vanguard of changing the national psyche away from gimme to self-reliance.
So, what are some of the enterprises that you can see doing work with other enterprises as opposed to saying, okay, well, you give us the money? What are some of the energies, resources you see that can be put together on a very incremental level to go forward with in some of these ways?
But that is exactly what we did in 1987 for 9 years in the Self-Help Commission. And there are agencies at work. I mean, there's so many NGOs. If you have an NGO conference, you will be stunned at the commitment of people and the number of NGOs trying to do things for their nation. And to my mind, that is where some taxpayer dollars could go. It's a stimulus, it's seed money. You could even have something where you say to the NGO, look, we will match, $1 million. If you can raise $1 million, we'll give you up to $1 million. They go out there, they tell people, look, if you give us $100,000, the government will match that. So we then have $200,000 to do something positive in this area or that area. So my thought would be that the NGO sector should get together, but it needs to have government interaction with it so that the government, the various ministries look at it, some in the health sector, some in the social development sector and other sectors, and find ways in which you can use the energy, and they're all free, it's volunteers mostly, use that energy to make Trinidad and Tobago a better country.
You speak about commitment. How easy is it to be committed in this day and age where many people, they're wondering, okay, I want to join this program, I want to be part of this cause, but I'm not sure where I'm going to get mine?
Well, you know, commitment is infectious. If you bring the NGO sector together, what you have is a room full of tremendously committed people. And it's like an infection. It's how I was infected by Mrs. McBride. You know, she literally infected me with this, and she gave me a channel through which I could put my energies into trying to make Trinidad and Tobago a better place through family planning. Because I saw, you know, unemployment was rampant. Back then, the birth rate was 5 times the death rate. No matter how economically buoyant you are, you cannot create that many jobs, like 20 or 25,000 new jobs every year in a small society like ours. So clearly, family size had the benefit of reducing that unemployment number. It also improved the quality of life of people. It afforded them an opportunity to become better educated and therefore give more hope in the future to their children. So this is what motivated me. I thought, you know what, I could make a difference. And I think I did. I spent a long time, but I think I did.
So you speak to Ms. McBride and her influence and her spider web in terms of getting you involved, getting you hooked, getting you committed. I've also heard about you speaking to Lloyd Best and his inspiration
yes.
for you to get involved in national issues.
Yes. Well, Lloyd was a unique human being, an amazing man. And I remember the first stab I took at writing an article about a national issue was when they introduced a steel mill in Trinidad in the late 60s. And it was a scam. It was just an old pot they were going to melt bars in, and they had concessions, and they published their prospectus. I mean, it was outrageous. 1,000% profit per annum and so on, and they published it. So I took the prospectus and I was so affronted by it. This is 1968, and I wrote an article and I gave it to my friend Carl Jacob at The Guardian. And Carl came to me, my office was right next door to The Guardian, and he said, "Is all of this true?" And I said, every word was taken out of their prospectus. I'm quoting everything that they published. And he just handed it back to me and he said, "It's too hot to handle." And that was that. So subsequently, Lloyd and Dennis Solomon heard about it. And they came to my office and said, would I mind if they published it? And they published it. Front page story, but they spelled steel, S-T-E-A-L, steel mill at any price. And it made such an impact that the Sunday Express asked if they could reproduce it, and they did. They went right around the Caribbean. And after that, whenever I traveled, people seemed to know who I was because of that article at that time. Now they know me for lots of other reasons. But so that was the beginning of an amazing friendship. And Lloyd was a great inspiration. We had, you know, lunches regularly. And he had... Somehow he didn't seem to connect with the rank and file of people when he tried to go into politics. But as a philosopher, as a thinker, I would say he was probably one of the greatest human beings that Trinidad and Tobago ever produced.
You talk about it being handed back to you and being told that it's too hot to handle.
Yes.
Do you think, what kind of impact do you think that has to play on people who have something to say, but they're afraid of the repercussions?
Well, you know, if you're honest and you're truthful, it's not a cheap thing. It's an expensive passion to have. The victimization is intense. I mean, I've suffered victimization all my life. I'm writing my biography now, and I'm going to write about some of it. To write about it all would take the whole book. But so you really have to have courage, and you really have to have resources that you can fall back on because you're going to be punished. So when you stand up to be counted, you have to expect, you know, some collateral damage. You have to. And you have to be the sort of person that will shrug it off and say, well, okay, I understand you have to come after me if I speak truth to power, for example. And that article was speaking truth to power. And the power structure then would not have liked it. But you know what? The article caused that steel mill to stop. So I actually stopped it. And I remember many years later, the attorney who was involved with it, Mr. Hammersmith, an elderly gentleman, he met me and he really laid it on to me and he said, you were the reason why this thing never went ahead. I took it as a great compliment. I mean, his attack, that is. So.
And I can imagine, because there's a saying that a truthful tongue holds no friends. Yes,
but in Trinidad, I find I have a lot of friends, but they're genuine and they share that truth with me. So, and it's the same thing I'm trying to do now at TSTT. There's a 40-year culture of, you know, not actually doing the right things. But the new board of directors, of which I have the honor to chair, the wonderful board, we are bringing about some radical changes. So everything I've said to you so far, I'm bringing into TSTT. And I think that the trade union and the workers have begun to recognize that there's a paradigm shift at the top. So I think they see some hope for the future, and I certainly do, because we have a new 5-year strategic plan that is it's a whopper. It's fantastic. It's going to make a whole, I mean, this country is going to be so proud of TSTT, I hope.
Fingers crossed. You speak about political will and the fact that sometimes more is needed to actually take the country or take the people in that direction. Does that paradigm shift need to start from the top or from the ground, or does there need to be a middle point? How does that really work?
I think it is the responsibility of leadership to lead. So I think what happens is the top should be the stimulus. Bring the NGOs together. Bring them together regularly. Not just once for a talk feast and then you have all these plans, but bring them together once every 6 months. See who is staying the distance. One of the issues would be trying to get new people to join in these energies, younger people, because you have to have succession planning. Sometimes an organization has a driving force.
Sometimes people like that position.
Well, that was the difference between me and those people. In 1998 actually, I told the FPA, I want to retire. I'm giving you 1 year's notice. Of course, everybody said, no, you should stay on. You're so important. I said, no, it's enough. But part of that 1 year was spent in succession planning. So we had excellent people like Jerry Brooks became the chairman, Dr. Jackie Sharp became the president, and they were the future after 1999. So I think, you know, I'm very proud of all I did for the FPA, but I'm also very proud that when I left, it was with a plan and with good people there to continue to lead the organization. And I think that is what we need to do as we meet every 6 months with NGOs. But then the NGOs have needs, and they can't also become a conduit for gimme either. So there has to be this kind of seed money that governments can give to deserving NGOs who are able to account for what they do. I mean, the FPA have audited accounts. Many NGOs don't even keep books. They have to learn to do that. You have to teach them. So doing good is not enough, but accounting for how you do good is also very important to keep the taxpayer dollars flowing. So I would say the government should initiate a national conference every 6 months with NGOs, get reports, and have a plan, because the NGOs work in many sectors, and those sectors are the sectors where you have defined needs. And where you have unmet needs, you put the energy in. So that's what I would do.
Messages for the nation as we're looking at independence 54 years on?
Well, I would like to see that the nation turns its back on this gimme gimme syndrome. The fundamental issue of this country is to grow the feeling of self-reliance, and do not allow the political class to make promises which are not economically sensible. And I would like eventually to see good economics and good politics merging into one.
All right, so we want to thank you. Some people say when you pass your 10, your 3 score and 10, you're showing off. So you're 3 score, 10 and 10.
And 10.
So we say happy birthday again.
Thank
and
you.
We want to thank you for those words, shifting the narrative and the paradigm to one of self-reliance and looking at the person in the mirror and saying, what can you do for country? This is Emile Elias, and we thank you so much for actually tuning in.
Thank you.